Well, even as we head towards the budget, the estimates for government allocations for the next financial year have been finalized after reviewing requests from different state departments. Against a request of some 5.37 billion shillings, the Executive Office of the President has been allocated 5.13 billion. The Office of the Deputy President has been allocated 4.89 billion, an increase of some 20 million shillings. The Prime Cabinet Secretary's office is estimated to receive some 1.14 billion shillings, with the National Treasury allocated 146 billion, and the State Department for Economic Planning 66.78 billion shillings. The total budget estimates for the next financial year stand at some 2.39 trillion shillings. Well, on that note, we want to get into the interview segment, and of course, John Nyangi, he is a financial expert, of course, a senior analyst within the economy, of course, at the Institute for Public Finance. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've looked at the story there where, of course, we have the Secretary for Diaspora Affairs and others talking about the amount of money that we receive as remittances, and then saying that this is a larger source of foreign exchange. Of course, we have other things like coffee and that sort of thing. And then the proposals in the finance bill to tax this, essentially introduce VAT, remove exemptions on some other transactions. It then makes you ask, are we actually working to support this? Or is government simply looking at that this is growing and saying this is where we need to find the money?
Yeah, there are two aspects here. Mm-hmm. Number one, government has a budget, which just as shown here, mm-hmm, has been approved by Parliament.
Yes.
And that budget has to be financed. Mm-hmm. And the main source of revenue to finance that is through the tax.
Yes.
And now government is trying to get the money where the money is found. Mm-hmm. And one of the areas that the government has shown that there is money is through these financial services. And so there's the balance here. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's the money.
Yes.
And what is the potential implication of imposing higher and new tax on those transactions vis-a-vis the benefit which you have indicated, like stabilizing the Kenya shilling?
Mm-hmm. It then makes you think, because with government on the one hand saying there, as you've seen, talking about working to support places, corridors, where money that comes in from different parts of the world is still expensive, meaning that it's quite cumbersome to send money back home, bring down these costs. Won't this tax then make this more expensive?
Definitely, it's going to make it more expensive.
Yes.
And the likely effect is that we might have people explore alternative means not to go through the tax.
Yes.
Because that means it's going to reduce the amount of money that is going to reach the intended destination. By at the moment with, for example, the 15%, move it to 20%, and in addition to that, add VAT of 16%.
Yes.
So essentially it means it reduces the amount of money that will be available. So what does that mean? So people might devise coping mechanisms.
Yes.
They might want to transact outside now the formal spaces. And if they don't manage to evade the taxes or to bring down the cost of that tax, the amount of the volume of the money will go down. And you might find that in the long run, the way many experts have voiced on this, the government might not get more money by using this particular intervention as earlier intended.
A lot of the tax proposals we've seen in this finance bill are targeted at, so to say, trying to tax the lower end of the market, the informal aspects of this economy. And knowing that with the rebasing that was done in 2009, 2016, then the GDP expanded in tandem, but we haven't seen the tax revenue expand in tandem. Do you think the government has done a good job of trying to tax that end of the economy And if not, then what needs to be done so that these people can then start to get into the formal aspects of the economy and get into the tax brackets?
See, the challenge is that Kenya has about 40% of the GDP is in the informal segment. And the informal segment is actually hard to tax directly. So the only way you can get to tax is through indirect taxes.
But aren't we already taxing them through consumption taxes? Because if you look at the taxes on the Kandogo economy, the VAT on consumable goods and services at the lower end of the market.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that the only way you can tax them is indirectly. Because they're not documented well, you don't know how much you can get from them. And indirectly, there are many distortions because you may either be taxing too much on too little, or taxing too little on too much. So the progressive taxation or proportional tax, where the principle of taxation means that you tax based on ability. So you might find that some people in the informal sector, because of the difficulties to tax them directly, those with more income end up paying less tax. And those with less income end up paying more tax. So this is the situation, and to correct this, Kenya should take deliberate measures to reduce the size of the informal economy. Otherwise, there will be totally a different economy. The informal sector economy and the modern economy.
What are these measures that we are talking about to help this formalization? What would you suggest?
Number one, we ran a survey and we just asking those people what they feel is the challenge and why they wouldn't want to come into the modern economy and formalize. And one, they're saying about the difficulties in terms of formalizing, because formalization means if you're running a business, you get registered by registrar of companies. You get a PIN so that you can file returns. And now they're saying the amount of documents that you are required to register with the registrar of companies is a lot of work. They are also saying that even to understand, to file returns, even if you have done transactions, you have to get an expert. So they are saying those are some of the things that are making it very difficult. But however, they were saying there are a lot of benefits in formalization, because some of the business people were saying we are not able even to bid for some of the government opportunities because they require for you to have maybe a registration certificate. You need to have a KRA tax compliance, and if they are not, then they don't have those. So they miss out in some of the opportunities.
So that is that end of that budgeting equation. Let's look at the revenue aspects, because we've seen the fact that the government still has a huge deficit running with just weeks, actually 1 week to the reading of the budget policy statement in the budget statement in Parliament. We've seen I think the day before yesterday, a supplementary budget. Before that, we saw how much money has been raised, I think 1.7 trillion shillings vis-a-vis the entire budget that had been projected of about 4 trillion shillings. How are we going to fill these gaps? Where is this money going? We've heard of numbers this time around of first 3.7, then 3.9, then again 4 point something. I mean, where are we exactly?
Yeah, until the day when the appropriation bill is signed, that's when we'll be sure of what budget has been approved. And like the current budget for financial year 23-24, we had a supplementary budget barely 1 month after the approval. So even this one, I can tell you that we will have a supplementary budget 1 or 2 months after that, because you see how the planning is, because the numbers, they're not sure of how much they want to spend and how much they want to raise. So you just are wanting it's kind of a gamble. So like you have rightly said, the numbers are showing that this financial year, which is has barely 1 month to come to an end, and the performance of revenue in the 10 months, the figures that are now available, showing that about 1.7 trillion Kenya shillings has been raised from taxes against a target of 2.5 trillion.
Yes.
So you see, still, and I'm very sure that that balance will not be able to be collected within the 2 months. And we are seeing the expenditure. They have not tried to reduce the expenditure. So if the revenue underperforms and then the expenditure is high, does not come down, so we end up having a larger deficit.
Yes.
And with a larger deficit, more than actually what was approved, indicates that the government continues to incur more debt, and because that debt is short-term and is required within short time for budget support, even the cost of acquiring that particular debt is definitely high.
It's quite high.
Yeah, and now you end up facing in a situation that I call an overload, that the public debt level that this country is carrying has exceeded the capacity that it can carry. So that's why you see is facing some turbulence in navigating this situation.
You've talked about something very interesting, the fact that we actually can be incurring debt which is not yet approved. Essentially, this creates a challenge because then Parliament is not in control of where this money is going and that sort of thing, and it might not even be budgeted and spent in a way that will benefit Kenyans. When you look at our debt portfolio, because we know that quite a large chunk of the cash we're raising is going towards that, what do you think needs to happen so that we then start to have a conversation that next year, the next financial year, and the year after that, we don't have the same conversation about overheating in terms of debt repayment in January, scrambling to create a way to push this down the road and that sort of thing, so that we start talking about a different story?
The thing is just to live within the means, and also to comply with the laws that we have, the Constitution, Public Finance Management Act, and the regulations thereon.
Yes.
Two of them. One says that now Parliament approved that we shouldn't have debt that is more than 55% of the GDP. But then they indicate that the National Treasury can incur more debt above 55%. And then they can justify that and regularize that and report to the Parliament. But you see that now beats even the whole logic. Like say 55, and here we are at 70 now. So can we be deliberate? And because 55% is the amount of debt that this economy can carry, and without compromising and defaulting on other sectors, be it health, be it education, and other social sectors.
Yes, so very briefly, our last question. If there was one thing that you could do to get this economy back in shape, back in, so to say, that it's on an even keel and moving in the right direction, briefly, what would that be?
Number one would be borrow for development. Like household, borrow money, invest it. Don't borrow for consumption. Here, we continue to borrow money
and consume it.
And consuming. Let's consume our taxes because we know we'll go back and collect it.
Yes.
But the money that we will repay, if we take taxes from you, you will not come for it.
Yes.
But if we borrow from you, you will come back for your money with the interest.
Okay.
So borrow that money and don't consume the borrowed money.
Invest
it, and in projects which have more return, not on projects like Roll, Kimorel, and the SGR, which cannot even be able to sustain themselves in terms of operations. So that money goes into waste. When time comes to repay the debt that was procured, to put them up, then that money is not there. So what do? You have to load more taxes and taxes and taxes, because that's the easiest way that you can get money now to service those debts.
Okay. Mr. John Nyange from the Institute for IPF, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
That, of course, brings us to the end of that conversation there, but to remind you, of course, that this conversation continues here on KTN News. We'll, of course, continue to look at the budget-making process until Thursday next week, when we will, of course, have that presentation in Parliament.